business to order. Let me just note that thanks to the flu, failing planes, and other reasons, we have a smaller group, and we have a couple people calling in by phone. So, well, I guess first we need a quorum.
There's a quorum.
We have a quorum. So now I'm going to ask for a vote to allow us to bring in Karen Williams and Jack Jacobson by phone.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? Okay. Okay. So I'm just going to say a couple of very brief things in my part of the leadership report, and then we'll go through. We have a number of items to go through. Since we last met, the State Board had its oversight hearing, and a good number of people were there to talk about the things that the State Board had done. So I was very impressed. And several council members were there asking a lot of questions and pushing us on a number of issues. So I thought it was a good day, and that our work is we're paying attention to it, and that's great. Related to that, I also want to say, as I think everybody knows, that the State Board of Ed unanimously decided to send a letter to the council about Washington Met and the plight of the students there, hoping that an alternative could be found. Subsequent to that, Councilman White introduced an emergency measure to keep it open for a year. In the end, that requires a 2/3 vote because it's an emergency. So in the end, there wasn't a 2/3 vote, there was a majority for it. And I just want to say, so many people talked about how important it was that we had weighed in and that we weighed in unanimously, because if the board, because we all, we come from different places, all believed it was that important, it was really that important. And so while we weren't able to keep the school open based on the 2/3 vote, I think we really did send an important message and learned that a lot of people cared about when we come from that kind of voice that really matters. And it was a really important issue to talk that way on, and I hope that whatever happens, there will be some serious effort to work with the students from there, because so many people talked out about it, and I think there will be some follow-up. So that's, I guess, the best side of it. And then we are going to come back later to something else I talked about earlier, which is how to handle the reading issue. So we'll come back to that. All right.
No, I think those were going to be my updates, but just wanted to thank, I guess, all of my colleagues here for your advocacy, both around Washington Met, but also really making sure that we had a good showing at the oversight hearing. Ruth and I talked about, you alluded to it just now, but we talked about, how so many people came and just talked about how valuable the board's voice was on a lot of different issues. And a few actually spoke very specifically about the work that individual board members were doing around the city to really advance issues important to their communities and to them. And so just want to understate that as much as folks in the media or folks around town will tell us about the limited authority that this body has, I think our oversight hearing, and quite frankly, as many times as the name of this body was mentioned at the council over the last week, really shows that we're making an impact, and that when we speak, especially as one voice, folks listen. And so I'm really excited about that. That the board has moved pretty progressively from sort of the periphery of the education conversation in the city, quite frankly, on a lot of issues to the center. And so that's something I think we should all be proud of, and I think is due to all of our efforts. So thank you to all of you, and obviously to our staff who work to also make sure that our profile has been raised and that we're keeping our commitment to the families in DC. Thanks.
I just want to make a note that the letter was discussed by individuals, council members, etc., and it shows that we did not need a resolution to do work, and all the discussions that we have about whether a resolution is needed, I think this points to makes a very valid point that resolutions don't necessarily have the weight, or that a letter has the weight of
Point very well taken.
resolution.
Very well taken. I mean, I think it's sort of a future discussion is, as we take up issues, to think about what are the right ways to do so. And
I think that the comments that the people who voted against Washington that staying open were horribly weak and uninformed, and didn't represent, at least from my point of view, what people in my ward were saying.
So we all got a lot of work to do, but I think where it mattered, we really showed a unified front, and I think the folks in that community appreciated it. I guess whatever we can do, I mean, we'll keep our ear to the ground about what's happening moving forward.
I think, I mean, one of the things that I have said in writing is that the advocacy will continue, and I think that is sort of a mutual feeling among folks who were involved, including, of course, the direct stakeholders. So, yeah, keep you in the loop. Okay, executive director's report.
I have no idea.
Okay. Okay, all right, we have a resolution on serving homeless students, homeless youth. Let me say this rose out of, first of all, a report from the Office of the Student Advocate, who was called in and sort of initiated a lot of work among the city's homeless youth last year. And based on that report, there was a recommendation from board members to invite people to come in and talk to us about it, and they did. And I think we were very moved by the situation, and based on that, asked the staff to see if we could put together a resolution, as well as, I think, sort of some of the testimony, sort of summary of the testimony to pass over to relevant people at to take a look at. And so it is in front of us, and per our regular process, this is a discussion of it. This is the time to raise issues, have a discussion. That discussion can continue among colleagues between now and 2 weeks from now at a public meeting, when it is going to be in front of us for a formal vote. But everybody take a look, let's take a minute, and then let's
Madam President, just so everyone knows, Jack is joined by phone and has Deja.
hello, Jack and Deja.
Good evening.
Jack, we're looking at the resolution on protecting homeless youth.
Yep, I heard. Thank you.
I have a question about number 47.
Yep.
What change to the at-risk funding formula, so funding provided to various groups is reported clearly? Is it not reported clearly? Is that what that means?
It's not disaggregated, right? The
I'm
at-risk.
sorry?
It's not disaggregated. The at-risk funding, we don't know.
It's the average funding goes to a number of different categories, but the funding is not reported on those different categories. So TANF, SNAP, foster, homeless, that type of thing. There is concern, I think, in some, in OSSI and other places, that disaggregation is not possible because of the end size for those groups. So it wouldn't necessarily be something that they would be able to report for student protection.
I would assume the size would only be too small per school, right? And is that what we're asking for?
So there's two different things, funding and test scores.
Yeah.
They've told us this multiple times that sometimes it's per board that it's too small. Like, because it would, the end size, even if it's 20 people, those 20 people will be known.
Yeah, and it's the average funding is provided to LEAs, right? For so they distribute it. So it's I think it would be difficult if you're providing, say, to an LEA that only has one school. How do you disaggregate that? The likelihood is that you won't be able to do that in a way that doesn't violate student rights.
Okay, then
Well, I don't know if this is Fraser's.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is Fraser's point, but to me, the word clearly doesn't. That word is subjective. It may be clear to some people what's being relayed in reporting, and not to others. So we're going to say that they're probably reporting. We should probably enumerate what we think those problems are.
But I guess that what John Paul is saying about not being, I don't know anything about figures. What I'm hearing is that you can't do it because then it would identify students. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's what Aussie said.
Right, but we're mixing up, we're conflating two different things. I think I have often raised, a number of us have raised often with Aussie, that we'd like to see the smaller data disaggregated so that you could see not just that X percent of at-risk students were at provisions or not, but to disaggregate it so you could see the percent of SNAP students, TANF students, some that they have argued has small n sizes. But I think what this is about is reporting on the spending of the fund. It's put citywide or by school, but it's not about individuals. It's about school X spent this much to support
Okay.
or LEAs. It's not the it's not
Not how many kids, but how much money is being
and on
dedicated
what
to each
transparency about what's going to groups of
Right, so like, are they spending money on, I don't know, breakfast or transportation or?
Right. or mental health counselors, especially for or
Coming out of, okay, so the number 56, which talks about comprehensive assessment to gain a better sense of the funding and resources needed. Is that what we're asking?
And I had a question there too about what agency we would be asking to be.
It seems to me that number 47 is, I don't know about the parameters we have, but that doesn't sound like something we can ask for.
We can ask, but it's not, I agree that I don't think it's within our authority to.
But I think that we can cover it
We can
with the
always
last
request it.
paragraph,
The-
where it talks about a better sense of the funding, because it seems to me that that's what number 47 is talking about, a sense of the funding, isn't it?
No, I think because in 47 it's about what individual schools
But it's not
Are-
individual, it's LEAs, right? What we're talking about are LEAs.
And, all right, so LEAs and
So the LEA, I mean, DCPS is an LEA.
yeah,
It's not like Elsie Whitlow,
but it
or
would,
that's
no, it would be.
more.
So that, yeah.
No, I'm saying that that's got more than one campus. It's not talking about one particular small charter school.
But it would, because then each one is an LEA, right? So we would.
No, I know, that's what I'm saying.
Third of Marshall would be.
Yeah.
I'm saying with the DCPS being the biggest LEA in the whole organization, in the whole thing, that's a lot of.
I think we have to figure out that, well, I don't know. It seems to me that is more a logistical issue, and what we're trying to figure out is how to make this more transparent so that we understand more what is happening, so that then we can decide, figure out what's recommended, right, in terms of what should be happening, right? I mean,
So I have, my concern was that
Get your hands up if you want to.
homelessness in and of itself is, for students, is something that's hard to calculate, which is something that ASI has talked to us about, especially because these families, it waxes and wanes throughout the year. They could, and also a lot of these students are not actually reporting that they're homeless. If they are living with their aunt or their friends, or they're oftentimes not reporting themselves as being homeless. When they've made it to the shelter, that is a last resort where the city has to report that statistic. So what we're asking for, I think, is very, very difficult to even calculate on a scale, but much less do we have the authority. I mean, obviously we can always ask, but they don't have to ever provide it to us.
Can I also note, so these are suggestions, right, based on a number of things, so we can change, this is not certainly set in stone, so we can change any of these recommendations to be whatever the board feels are appropriate and in line with what we're talking about. I think this is exactly the type of conversation that we were hoping to have based on this resolution.
And
So
I
this is great.
agree. I think if we were to move forward with this, there should probably be a section of why we would be using this information. What is it to be used for? Because we say we want this information, but we don't say, we say to report clearly, but we don't exactly say why.
That's it.
What we're going to use it for. And I agree with the additional persons added to the ombudsman's office and student advocate, but then again, that paragraph section actually states why.
right. Yeah, no, that's a good point.
I also would maybe consider pulling that out and making that its own resolution. I think we might be trying to put too many things into one paper.
That's a good point too, because that's very important. It really needs to be a standalone kind of thing. Because because we're asking for,
We're asking for
Money.
multiple asks in this.
and it's gotta be, gotta approve to get somebody and then figure out what that person's salary. I don't know anything about that, but that seems to me to be something that's important on its own.
So I'm recognizing myself. So this gets to sort of what are we useful in doing? What can we do that is a value added on this that sort of makes something happen? And it seems to me one thing that we should have in here, regardless of what the asks are, which is a very good question, and we should talk about that. But it seems to me that when we were listening to these panelists, that there were some very horrific, very specific, very concrete issues that they were raising. Kids couldn't get to school, they were sent to other schools, there wasn't this, I can't even remember what they were, but I remember it being very, very upsetting, which is part of why we said, let's do this. So one thing that I would think about and propose is that a really important part of this is that to make these whereases based on literally what we heard. So it's very much about DC, it's very much about the situations that DC students are finding themselves in. So that whether or not, and in a way it goes back to Ashley's point about the letter, that part of it is to draw attention to some very concrete realities that we're in a position to know. We have our the advocate's office sort of learned about this. He let us know we have the test. These have been brought to our attention, and we want to bring them to other people's attention who are in a position to act. And one big thing is to sort of include in this, fill this up with lots of the whereas should be very concrete. Whereas we saw this, whereas students are facing this, whereas school X and blah blah. So I'll just leave it at that for now. Come back later on.
Yeah, well, one concrete thing that I see isn't in here, and you mentioned is transportation.
I think it is. It
Is it?
says, whereas,
Which line?
19, whereas homeless students face barriers in meeting school enrollment requirements, getting access to transportation, and receiving many academic and health services.
Right, but I mean in terms of what we're asking for.
But I would even go back to saying, that's a general statement, I mean, homeless students everywhere face presumably that issue, but what are these students facing that, and it seems to me there were issues about, there were supposed to be buses that left from New York Avenue and then they got stopped,
Right.
or they only went to some schools, or they only went for some ages, and the parents had to pay. I mean, there was a whole set of very specific things, as I recall, that were laid out. I don't remember the specifics, I mean, we got the testimony.
Yeah, I mean, so generally, we wouldn't put anecdotal like stories in a resolution, so that's probably why some of the specifics are not necessarily mentioned in it. But I do get what you're saying. I mean, if I remember right, the specific of the New York Avenue was that there are shuttle buses that bring them to the two closest metro stations, but those don't necessarily make it easy to get to the schools where the students are going. Right, and so I don't know if the request would be the individualized, but then they also had the access to the Uber and Lyft rides for a short period, and then that stopped and ceased, if I remember correctly.
There's
One thing that,
an organization that's doing work on this, is it Lab of DC or Lab?
And the Playhouse project, I mean, some of it, I mean, your point is fair about anecdotes, but some of what they were raising was not anecdotes, it was sort of reports, and, you know, they are think tank organizations that have something to say, Playhouse,
Playtime.
Playtime
And
project.
Literacy Lab does some work
Yeah.
on it as well, and there are multiple different organizations.
Yeah, I think I mean, we potentially could add a resolve clause that would talk about when housing families at shelters or at hotels, there needs to be a plan in place prior to that housing on how to get those students to school, their school, right? Like they need to have that as part of the
So
housing.
when DC General was still around, there was a separate family shelter, and those students those parents and families did have access to a couple more supports, such as there was a bus. They also had the opportunity to either go to the schools closest to DC General, Payne Elementary, or continue going to the school that they were coming from originally. I think now that DC General is no longer, and that there are multiple smaller shelters, and there's no longer a family shelter. This is one of the issues that multiple different families have been having, because there could be one or two families in a shelter, say in Ward 7. Okay, I'm just making, whereas there's one or two families in a shelter in Ward 3, and they're all split up now instead of being.
Just a question for you, has the attendance count, I think, has been dealing with this transportation issue, have they talked about anything that's related to the,
I can ask, not specifically.
but it might be also playing.
Yeah.
one thing that came up was that McKinney-Vento homeless assistance act. It sounded to me like there was a lot of balls dropped about not doing that in schools, or schools didn't have somebody. I think that's something that it's very important, because we recognize that through the testimonies, and that was brought up by different people from different places about how some of the schools didn't have like a liaison, and each school is mandated to have that, right? That's right. I mean, they're supposed to, by law, they're supposed to have it.
By law, they're supposed to have them, and so my understanding, my experience is, and they do, but that doesn't mean the person has the time or training to accomplish what needs to be accomplished.
It also did.
Sometimes it's the random staff member.
It's someone's name.
It also doesn't mean that the families are reaching out either. Like a lot of homeless families are not telling people they're homeless.
that's what the homeless, that's what the liaison officer ought to be doing, but you're right about the not being identified.
And I don't know if this is true or not, but I heard this in passing, that central office is supposed to have like a cohort of liaisons from central office to coordinate for homeless services. Is that true? I don't know how they do it. I heard they might serve schools in clusters or something like that, but I haven't heard that for sure.
So, all right, so let's,
Maybe that's a good question for the president's office. Do you know by chance, I don't know if you heard my question, whether or not DCPS central office is supposed to have like homeless liaisons who work from central office? And
Yes.
I mean, like they're fully staffed, you know?
I mean, I don't know how many staff positions there are, but they have full-time employees working in the office.
Gotcha. And are they supposed to, I don't know if you know, but are they supposed to like take like clusters of schools or is it just kind of on call?
What do you mean clusters? So there's a homeless liaison at every school.
Right.
And that homeless liaison, in theory, is supposed to be in contact with the homeless liaison staff people within central office.
Gotcha.
But I don't know if they're like assigned for a cluster or anything like that.
Gotcha. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, that answers.
And I think one of the issues that they raised was that sometimes there would be homeless students in the school and the homeless coordinator didn't know, which is, I don't know how you always solve that because people may not want to be known, but it's sort of that's specific. All right.
Can I just ask, John Paul, actually, do you know if the community schools initiative is doing anything specifically around?
No.
No, we don't know.
They're not. I mean, individual community schools are doing things if that is a major issue for that school. But it isn't something that the grant program or the advisory council is talking about specifically, although it certainly could be.
Do you happen to know if there's some schools that are doing something that's robust, that's?
I would have to look.
Okay.
I would have to look specifically on the programming.
Be interesting.
I don't know that there is.
But I'll say, I think some schools are, attending in some way to triage kind of the symptoms of homelessness. So some might have like a food pantry or washer and dryers inside the building and things like that to support families who might be experiencing like that insecurity. As well as like, I know a bunch of community schools also do like family engagement, which I guess can take on different forms, kind of depending on the makeup of and situation of the family. But,
Is Martha's Table a partner?
With their house.
Not in, no, but they, I mean, like in 8, they do tons of like joyful food markets. And
Yeah,
things like
no,
that.
that's what made me think of
Sometimes in
it.
collaboration with the community school coordinator or something like that. So,
Oh.
yeah, so they support more schools in Ward 8 than there are community schools in Ward 8.
That's
Which is really nice,
Good move there.
yeah.
So, let's say that we can sort of build up the whereases with much more detailed examples of problems that students are facing based on what we've heard.
So can we enumerate those so that we know what we're adding?
I can't because I don't have this. But I mean, there was all these
Can I just make a quick note, line 56, where it starts calling for a comprehensive assessment of the number of homeless students in DC, which seems to be a little bit in contradiction because we name OSSE's reported number. So is that supposed to ask for something different, or are we just assuming that we don't believe it's comprehensive?
And it was raised by some of the people.
What Ashley was saying is that the homeless population for children is really transient. So you don't, I mean, if you make a count on the 30th of September, it might be like 100, and then on the 30th of October, it might be 50, or it might be 200. Right? So I don't know how you make a count. So at the end of the year, we've had this many homeless students that reported that they are. That's the only way to do that.
I don't know.
Is it point in time? Is that how they assess the number? Or?
They might do it through like shelters, which is inaccurate. So
But
it's
the
like
problem with the shelters is, what Ashley was saying too, is there are a lot of homeless students
No, I know.
in the
I'm
city
saying
that
it's
don't live in
inaccurate.
shelters.
Or who just we wouldn't know.
Don't self-report.
It's included in that response.
I mean, it's a horrible problem.
So what I'm thinking is if we went back and sort of whereases in a way, not as whereases for a resolution, but more if we were writing a letter almost, like what would we say that we heard? How would we sort of summarize it? These are the points that we heard about the failures in the system that these kids are confronting. What would be the 5 or 8 or whatever number of things? And then so putting that sort of in one.
So to make, yeah, because I'm confused now. So are we switching this to a letter?
No, I'm saying that what we want to convey is what we learned, not the general points, not the
So-
idea that, for example, I mean, McKinney-Vento protects the rights of students. That's a fact. But what we want to hear about is the way in which what we heard that night was about the failures to do that.
That's not how a resolution is written. So the resolutions there is a specific way of writing them, and the whereas clauses set out with a series of facts or information that is pertinent to making the recommendation in the resolve section. So there is a different style of writing for a letter versus.
No, I'm saying the fact is, whereas according to the Children's Playroom Project, X% of students aren't assigned a school. I mean, I can't remember. I mean, I'm saying that pull the facts from
According
the
to
testimony,
information and testimony,
That are
yeah,
not
At our-
general. Yeah.
at our January public board meeting.
Because that's what we want to convey. Is sort of
That's what she should.
we want to bring to attention the things that were so distressing to us to make sure that they are known beyond our chamber.
Can I make a couple of English teacher things?
Yes, and then I want to talk about the whereases. But yeah.
Okay, you want to talk about, these are in the whereas.
If they're literally English.
He's talking about grammar.
Yeah, the grammar should,
No, it wasn't grammar. Like number 15, I think 15 and 16 should be taken out. Because it doesn't, it sort of works against the argument.
that we have more homeless students. I'm not following.
Seems important.
Oh, okay, I read it.
Okay.
I'm sorry. And in line 12, after youth, could you say were reported to have? Because that number is, I'm assuming is a correct number, but we know that there are students who aren't.
Who are being reported. Yep.
Other thoughts on the, I'm moving, you're done for the moment.
Yeah.
Okay. So on the resolves, I hear a lot of interest in this second resolve and trying to focus a lot on that. And then
What does that say? What are the various groups? Shouldn't we sort of say who the various groups are? Or that sounds fast vague.
I mean, I guess maybe it would help if we just pull back and say, what does the board want to say on the at-risk funding in its relation to homeless students? So ignore what's on the page here, but let's just discuss what do we want to have. If anything.
Is it recognized?
As a group,
Or is homelessness recognized as far as at-risk funding? Or is it just,
it is one of the component groups, yes.
it's one of the things?
It's one of the component groups, yes. Along with TANF, SNAP, foster status.
if those changes are made, how would this help us do our policy work that we have authority over? That's, I think, something that would help me of why we're doing this ask, because ASSI's said to us, several times over the past 3 years that
No, but they're two different things. That's not what we talked to.
That's right, I know it's been mentioned, yeah.
I mean, I guess, I think that's right, that this is about the spending, not about the, so it's,
So
I guess it's asking for a sort of a breakdown of what monies are going to support homeless children.
Is that something?
Yeah,
we can do?
I don't know, part of what I'm hearing is maybe that might not be where we want to go.
Right.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, is it something that, if we're talking about funding, is it something that we think additional funding should be provided to the at-risk, targeted to homeless populations, or like what?
I wouldn't put that in right now because I don't think we've done enough background to know what the funding is, and B, how much more, if any, would be needed to help.
I mean,
Does that-
to Ruth's earlier point, do we want to switch to something that says, encourages the mayor and council to identify additional funding to reduce transportation barriers for homeless students, or to provide, I don't know, additional funding for rapid rehousing for families who are housing insecure rather than just homeless. Like, what are the things that we think are going to be the most effective in helping these students? I think is the focus, right?
Yeah. And
That-
I know the mayor's
No.
office has done some work, like we all heard, but with the Uber and buses and the partnerships, but what more can we ask that?
So what I'm gonna suggest, I think that, we need more detail in here, we can all go back and look at the, maybe, I guess we don't have transcripts or something,
Well, we do.
or
We have the minutes
the
and
minutes.
we have the video that we can go back and look at this one again. I mean, we have been testing a transcript type service.
Oh, maybe you could try that one.
We're working on it. It's not perfect, but we're working on it.
I guess what I think generally is we need to you guys need to revisit, and we also need to revisit what was the specific kinds of problems that were raised, so that we can sort of, and then sort of think of what the right results are.
So is the suggestion then to bring this back at the March working session for further discussion, or?
Or we could still bring it up in February, but as a revised.
I don't know how we can bring it up to be, I don't think we can bring it up in February if we don't know what it is. It seems to me that some of these, are like, we're not really sure about what they said, what they're asking. I think it needs, some of our intentions are good, but I think we need to spend a little more time.
Okay, all right, so I think we wanna revisit it and bring it back in March.
Okay.
And that,
March
that's still
business
put, at the March business meeting, which still puts us in sort of a window of budget, so if it's relevant to budget, it may not be relevant to budget, maybe that other things.
But what are we gonna do in between so that we have more?
So can I make a recommendation, and this may be helpful going forward? Would it be okay for the board to identify one board member who can work with staff on making the changes and then make the presentation to the group? Okay, thanks, Rachel. All right, so we will work with Rachel to have a draft ready for the March working session. Great.
And I would say as part of that, if you can figure out how we can get something like that transcript so that we can all know more, we'll be better partners for Rachel.
And the video transcript is ready online too, so folks can rewatch or listen to it or that type of thing.
Does it have the notes and the number? We just get that by going up to it. All right, so I want to raise, okay, we're moving on to the teaching reading. So let me give some context, and I just want to have sort of a sense of individuals on this. So back in, I think, November, there was a hearing at the council about dyslexia, and to the surprise, I think, of many people, something like 70 or 80 people showed up, I think that's the number. And all day talked about a variety, sort of the range of issues, a sort of range of people talking about the ways in which their kids weren't being diagnosed for reading difficulties, weren't getting the intensive help they needed, were being told basically, oh, this is just developmental, don't worry about it, let's, she'll be fine by second grade, she'll be fine by third grade. And eventually the student is many, many years behind. And as I noted, I personally had this experience, and it was quite an experience to hear so many people, dozens of people saying basically the same experience. The result of which was at the end of the day, the chairman of both the Ed committee and the committee of the whole wanted to have legislation. I think, DCPS and OSSI were nervous about it. We weren't quite sure that it was needed, but both the chairmen said, no, we've been hearing this all day. There's clearly a set of problems. There needs to be legislation that deals with this. Kids have to get assessed. They have to get the right instruction. And so that's sort of part one. Part two, so that legislation is sort of presumably being developed. Part three is we decided as a board that we were going to bring in some experts, both kind of academic, content area experts, also teachers, reading specialists, and so on, to talk to us about what they saw in the schools and their ideas about what would be appropriate remedies, what kinds of things might go into this legislation. And one thing that I raised, and I think people were sympathetic, but I want to put more weight on it than that, was that maybe a place that we could hone in on is that while this legislation might deal with a lot of things, screenings need to be done this often, this kind of screener, there's a lot of particulars. That one thing that would be true regardless is we have a huge teaching staff. I mean, if you just say the K-2 teaching staff across both sectors, who don't necessarily know very much at all about the reading science and the right ways to be teaching reading. And the way our certification works and the way our emergency teachers work and the way all that works is, you just have to assume that most of the K-2 teachers in the city aren't well trained in this stuff. And how do we get from that point as quickly as possible to a place where we can really say, at least our K-2 staff really understands it at the level of knowledge and has had some practice with it in the classroom, working with coaches, working with children who have these issues, and know what to do. How do we get from here to there in sort of acknowledging that this is a huge issue and it's a ticket item, it's a cost item. And so then we have these panelists come in.
Well,
Clarification, I didn't watch that hearing. I apologize for interrupting. Did teachers say they weren't equipped to address these issues?
At the council hearing?
Yeah.
Yeah, at the council hearing and also at our hearing.
Okay, thank you.
So then we have these hearings, we have these people come in, and so then the question is, what do we want to do with this? And let me raise one idea, and I just want to get feedback on it. It seems to me coming out of that, we heard about some sample programs, I think one was in Mississippi, and this is sort of, okay, and then the staff put together a summary memo, really laying out in summary a lot of what was said and some of the recommendations made by people. What strikes me is that there were several very specific examples. I think there were Pennsylvania, Mississippi, Frederick, Maryland, there might have been one more, where school districts and or states had really taken on this training issue in a big way. And they had one of several ways of accomplishing it. I mean, in Frederick, they sort of went out and hired an outside provider, and over a period of, I think, 2 years, provided training to every think they did K4, K5 teachers in the city, and it was, I forget, 100 hours. It was a lot, and then they train people in each, so that there's one in each school who's supposed to maintain that training as new people come in. So you're not constantly reliant on that third party. So that's what they did. In Pennsylvania, they sort of established a set of requirements that teachers had to know and gave them a period of time to know it. The result of which was that the universities started to offer these courses, some nonprofits started to provide the courses, and it was, if I'm understanding it right, teachers were sort of empowered to sort of pick where to go. I'm not sure I have the details right, but that was sort of another model. And part of what happened out of that sort of supply and demand model was the universities came forward with courses that met the requirements. And then in Mississippi, if I'm remembering, they sort of, the state agency trained a bunch of trainers who went out. So there's several different models. And so one thought I had was to sort of say, look, we need a way of reaching this mass of teachers over some timeline. And here's 3 options and we're for it. I mean, something like that. But that sort of takes one piece of this and sort of says, this is what we're, somehow the council has to do this. And here are some options. And so that's kind of the recommendation. And so then there's a question, I mean, do we do it as a resolution? Do we do it as a recommendation? A letter that we send over to the committees. And one issue here is it's not clear where the committees are, and so at some level we may be coming in late to affect the development. On the other hand, we want to wait until there is a legislative proposal, and then we're responding to that. So I'm sort of really putting this out, and it speaks to this broader question that came up at the beginning, which is what's the right, different issues, different situations require us to do different things, and that's really what I'm putting on the table here. We know there's a big issue, there's a big challenge. The committees are dealing with it. We know some stuff probably that they don't, I would say. We have a lot of expertise at this table. What should we do? What do we do? What makes
I
sense?
like this.
I was wondering if it was possible that maybe since there's a certain amount of PD days, that I don't know what happens on PD days, but could it be integrated into the PD days, like a training for teachers to, English teachers and math teachers to take a course and learning how to teach students with dyslexia, or if there's an extra day that could possibly be taken out for teachers to be trained, or if it should be required as a teacher to know how to teach students with dyslexia.
I mean, one question that I had in all this, and I don't know that we know, is there any way in this city to sort of establish that here's a set of things you need to know before you can teach anything? And in this case, to sort of say, if you're teaching K2 teachers on this very important thing, here's a set of things you need to know, period. You can't sort of say, no, you don't have to know that for 2 years because you're on, I don't know, is there a way to do that? And how would we?
I think the only way to do that would be through the teacher certification lecture process, which would be regulatory. And
there's hardly any now. Because there's hardly any now, even praxis. You can teach without praxis. You gotta commit that you're gonna do it, or you're grandfathered into it, like I was, or great grandfather. But the thing about it is there needs to be recognition. I think this is one of the. There needs to be recognition by the system that there's a problem. I mean, anyone watching the testimony of people whose children are dyslexic, or whose students are dyslexic, or who know anything or don't know anything about what dyslexia is, would want to get something done so that they can find it. But the system needs to recognize there's a problem, and then they'll set up a mechanism to take care of it.
Isn't there some aspect of teacher?
Well, I'm sorry, I think that's Jack trying to get in. Jack?
That was Karen.
Oh, hi Karen, sorry.
No problem. a very unique problem, and how we address it is important. I don't think a lot of, because I have dyslexia, and I have had to overcome a lot of difficulties in learning not to read, but I invert numbers and things like that. That is an issue that should be addressed. And my suggestion is that maybe we have some kind of work or document that shows that the officials in both sectors, the DCPS and the public high school, how important it is to have teachers who can recognize a person with dyslexia and help them navigate the waters to work with those individuals. I'm sure there are a lot of people who are going through the system who are never diagnosed or know what's going on with them.
Exactly.
I remember back when
I don't know how we do that, but I'm just saying we need to make our schools more aware of the issue.
So if I'm understanding, Karen, you're saying our focus should be that we as the board try to make people more aware of the problem, not necessarily focus on offering ideas about how the system could take care of the problem. Is that a fair read of what you're?
That would be, yeah, I think that makes sense. We gotta make a clarion call for it rather than, we don't have to offer,
wasn't the hearing that,
I think it was part of it. All right, but it's an emergency.
I think I don't know if you intentionally, I think the question is how involved should we get at what level, whether that's sending policy recommendations, whether that's sending a memo to say, here's what we heard, whether it's, I don't know if it was Karen or you, I'm sorry, that just said, I think it was Karen, saying sending information to different LEAs and entities.
Alex, what I don't, I remember back at the testimony, the hearing, when the witnesses were testifying, they talked about student screening, and how how difficult it was to actually, like, for the process to actually happen, and two, like, how, like, frequently it doesn't happen. And I was just wondering, like, for other issues, like, recently I just took a test for, I think it's like, it's called FastBridge, if you need extra help in English and math. And I was just wondering, why can't it be something, like, mandatory for all students to, like, take it? I don't know exactly what happens in the screening, I don't know how long it takes, but it seems like if this were something that were universal, it would be able to it would allow these people with dyslexia to get the help they need from a younger age, so that when they get older, they don't experience some of the negative effects that really just arose from, like, neglect or not knowing that dyslexia was there.
I mean, I think that is very key, and that sometimes the teachers even training to know how to do the screening.
Well, I think that is,
I'm going to push back a little bit on that because just having a sweeping statement to say all students should be screened, A, it's costly, B, it's ineffective. B, C, I mean, we can't, that's outside the scope of our authority and expertise to say all students should be screened. I would like to see this memo. I think putting together this memo was a great idea of what we heard, and taking these materials with a letter and presenting it to the council and the Committee on Education for their findings as they conduct more information. That could be a way for us to use our resources more effectively. We already have this memo put together, and we can say.
How do you feel about summarizing? I mean, obviously we can compile what we heard.
Right.
But
Along with.
How do you feel about summarizing into policy recommendations and delivering it
recommendations that we as a group might believe that are best suited. But it depends on what would be in the scope of our authority.
So you're saying those recommendations should be what we have control over or authority over?
Right, what we're saying, like, sending all students should be screened. Thank you. I mean,
we can make recommendations, that's not outside, we're not doing it, it's not outside of our scope to make recommendations.
right, but we don't. And who are we to say, because we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Because we heard from 12 people. Now we know everything there is about dyslexia, and we're here to say all students get screened. Or have we looked at the price tag, or what that could be, insurmountable? How are we going to pay for it? Things like that.
Yeah, no, just to speak to that, I would just say that that is the recommendation of the decoding dyslexia folks based on, I think, what's happening in other districts. That is actually a really important first step. But
The screening is one of their huge
yeah,
recommendations.
I mean, that's what
Others
they're,
aren't getting done.
but, and I would just say,
Actually in our,
Yeah. but I don't know about cost, I mean, I haven't looked into that, but what I think this is true, that they are arguing that it is part of DIBELS, and it would just require sort of adding this extra part to DIBELS and training teachers. I think the piece that's missing that's huge that you're bringing up is then what do you do, right? So let's say you find out that some percentage of your students need services, teachers aren't, schools aren't equipped, so I think it's the first step. I don't know how costly it is, it might not be as costly as we think, but it seems really important because what we do know now is that, what is it, like 10% of the population has some kind of, is on
And even
the
more
spectrum.
will show the symptoms if you don't teach the right ways early on and you develop the.
Right, and the early screening apparently is really effective in at least flagging these. But it does seem, I mean, you brought up the question about should we be proactive or responsive to legislation piece. I think that's a big question. I mean, an important question for us to think about now, because if we want to be proactive, then we need to do it now. So I agree that we should, use the input that we're getting, not necessarily claim that this is not exhaustive, but this is what, based on what we have heard from the testimony, this is what we're recommending.
Or maybe, now you're making me think that maybe at this point, maybe one thing you might do in the future is be more proactive, but maybe in this case, maybe the better thing is we're having the conversation, let's get on the table where our consensus is or isn't, and use it to respond to what comes forward.
It sounds like people are for compiling a memo.
Could it hurt?
We have this.
We have it, yeah.
Yeah, like if
Oh,
I
you're
take
saying
this,
send this
the
memo.
written information that we received to members of the council and.
What the memo that we have is a compilation of both of the hearings.
Yeah.
Of what we heard, I mean, and if their staff wants.
Wait, sorry, Karen, calling in Karen, of Deja.
The more people that know about it, I was just saying, raising awareness about the issue is probably the best first step, because the more people know about it, the more things kind of automatically start, happening, because it's like, in this state, I know this, like, they handle dyslexia this way, and it just seems like more like a catalyst type thing rather than proposing legislation and then it failing and trying to like come up with issues. It can kind of, work itself out on its own.
All right, other comments?
Yeah, I mean, I think being proactive would be good and sending over while they're starting to think about what to do.
Is there any time frame?
We don't really know the time. I mean, we know that it's, it's being considered and the committees are working on it. That's really what we know. I don't know. I think it's. I have to say, I'm not super thrilled with just setting it over without something that makes recommendations. I just don't think it will get taken seriously. But I'm open. I mean, I guess that's sort of Ashley's idea is to send this over as it is. I think it's too
As you're starting to think about legislation, here's what we have heard.
I mean, to sort of say here as a first step, I guess that's. No, I mean, that's what
Well, this is Jack. I think to Ashley's point and to, I think it was Deja's point, this is a really good, just sending this over is a really good step to indicate to the council that we're paying attention. Folks have approached us and we'd like to partner with folks on addressing the issue long term. I think this is just a first step in a marathon, right? You gotta take that first step and this is a good one, I think. That positions us well and it sort of takes out that this is important to us.
So one.
Would a, rather than jumping into outline below, would we have an opening statement about what follows? And I think that might
Put
cover.
together a letter
Yeah,
on,
Yeah, I mean, it could, that's, no, nothing, I mean, maybe there's a way to sort of, in a way, sort of partly summarize and partly recommend, for example, to sort of say part of what came out, and you could look at this, but that one thing that has to happen is to, I guess this would be my list, that one thing that comes out is we have to establish what it is that teachers need to know, at least in these grades, and figure out a way to make sure everybody has it. And that's going to require a lot of training, and some things to consider are, and we could say,
Well, that's what this is, isn't it?
well, and then to refer them to that, but pull out the things that are about training, like there's sort of three models that we heard about. One is to bring in I guess I said, to bring in an outside provider who can do it. Two is to give funding to teacher tuition fees to teachers to go out and take it in different places. To sort of, I guess to sort of structure what's in the memo. Yeah, no, I know. It's to point people to the places in the memo where that stuff is done. It's a point to those parts of the
I
memo
think
that are
because
done.
to be honest with you, the list of names and even the testimony, I mean, this is the meat of the piece, the recommendations. This is what we want done because of that. And we don't want to overwhelm them with all of this stuff that they might not read anyway.
Well, this first section, I think,
it tells you who they are. I mean, some of these panelists were at the council hearing as well, so.
But it
I think
could
it
come.
comes
Well,
down
some
to,
of them were and some of them weren't.
Right, exactly, so they,
not to speak for Ruth, but I think it comes down to, do we as a board come up with recommendations as well, or highlight some of these recommendations that are called out? Or just leave it as this? I've intentionally not shared my perspective.
But it sounds like, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Fraser, it sounds like you're talking about format sort of, and that makes sense to me too, actually, that maybe, well, not with the names, so people could go as almost like a reference list or something, right?
Because
So at the end, and what we really wanna highlight that they see, if they're going through a ton of stuff, then we wanna put what they see, or what we want them to look at up front, but we put the recommendations.
Because I'm just looking at opening statements, because it gives you something at the beginning, and then it says the following table lists the panelists in order of appearance. On the following page is a list of panelists' recommendations. I think that we should, you can put that, the list, the stuff about the list when you give it the list.
Right.
And
So,
then, and say, and then get right into what the following are recommendations based on their testimony, the testimony of the following panelists or something.
it's almost like an appendix. So what if, I mean, this kind of
Yeah.
puts together your idea and your idea, I think, of like, we summarize these into our own 3 recommendations or something, whatever they are, 3 to 5. And then everything that's on here is sort of an appendix, like this is why we're recommending it, because these
But you
actually,
want to punch the
Yeah.
recommendation.
if they only read 3 things, we want them to be the first 3, up front, right? Does that make sense? I mean, does that sound?
I think that makes sense.
So it's,
Or we could put a cover letter saying in these past 2 months, whatever, December and January, we held blah, okay? Of those meetings, we heard testimony. And panelists provided the following recommendations
Both.
as a cover letter, okay? And then attached, you'll see a memo outlining with more detail the recommendations, panelist testimony, and written information.
Because if you do that, then you don't need to have, you don't have to have this, I mean, if I'm grading this,
Well, you could have
I'm taking,
this,
you don't have to
but
have this
as a
part,
cover letter.
because this is the same thing. So you're just doing it twice. We're not, it's concentrating on the recommendation.
but all right, so I'm now, so if I look at the recommendations that are here from the panelists, one thought would be to, add a little bit more there so that some of them are more, for example, just as an example, ensure explicit instruction and decoding is provided. One of the things that they've talked about is to all students, that this has to be part of what goes on in there. But I think there might be ways to just modestly add some stuff into this. And then here's my question: is do we want to have? Could we agree to have, 3 overarching things that came out of this, sort of, whether it's the universal screening, or it's the, and we have to have a timeline by which time every teacher has this, and the district has to figure out a way to pay for, to cost that, and maybe dealing with something under the teacher preparation that there has to be that there has to be a way to figure out a certification on this.
Well, I do want to note too that the certification issue would only cover DCPS.
Yeah, I
So,
think that's
we're
kind of
talking about-
outside our scope. I think we should.
So you want to
focus
just
on-
refer that the panelists recommended this, but not that we did, would be how you would do it.
Yes, if we were to have any of our own recommendations, I think they would be very, very broad in saying something like more supports should be given towards students with reading problems and dyslexia. I mean, I am just making them very, very broad. Just something that would accompany something that we have authority over.
When we do have a certification, maybe that's the place to go.
Isn't there some
So over only the teacher trainings.
Yeah.
So could we
Well, but we can, but even in
So-
even in the narrowest version of our authority, we can advise us.
You can certainly-
So actually, that's a.
So I just want to bring things back to directions for the staff. So is the general sent to the Committee of Education saying something to the effect of, we received this testimony, we know you were working on a bill related to this, we thought it important for you to have our record of the information that we gathered, and these are the main things that we found in this testimony. Is that,
I mean, is anybody for trying to have some more pointed stuff or some more specific? I mean, it's sort of the range of, where do we want to be on this continuum of very general to more specific and on what? So that's sort of what I'm trying to do.
Can I just clarify though?
Yeah.
When you say more specific, do you mean based on our expertise or just trying to?
Well, I would say pulling out of here
Pulling
based
out
on
of
what, specific examples or.
Yeah, but I mean, is that different than what John Paul said, that in the cover letter there would be sort of a summary that pulls out the important points? What are you saying is different than that?
Well, that we're, how close do you come to saying that we're recommending that, as opposed to.
This is what we heard.
I
I see what you're saying. Okay.
As Jeff pointed out, if we start to list our personal or our recommendations, we start to step on toes. Whereas if we were to submit this as is,
That's what we
the
heard.
council and their staffs are working on it, we could open a door for being a partner rather than saying, we know better, this is what we're recommending, you do what we said.
Okay, so is there any other thoughts, or is that sort of where we are? That's all, I'm just trying to figure out if that's where we are.
I've intentionally not shared, but I fully agree that I'm more for info sharing versus recommending, unless there's been an invitation for us to formally provide those recommendations.
and we can certainly, that's actually part of it, we can certainly put in there, the state board stands ready to partner with you
Yeah.
if you need it, if you'd like discussion or something
Please
like that.
invite.
I mean, I also don't want to establish the precedent that we don't recommend things unless we're invited to, but I agree. I mean, on this one, it's.
One is not our jurisdiction.
Oh,
Exactly,
still.
I said we do it.
But
So
I
you
think,
wanna take back your-
I think on this issue specifically, where there seems to be a lot of human capital all over the place, really focuses on this issue, it seems less of a priority for us to advance those recommendations, rather than just contribute to the conversation at that point. But
And leaving open.
I don't think that's a general precedent that it must be.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, and also leaves open, what we do when and if there is a proposal, and at which point we can come back and finalize. So I,
And maybe they'll say, yes, we want to hear from you. And then it's like,
No, I-
great.
You might say you do,
Even better.
so we'll do it.
all right, okay. So, the next is the meeting calendar. And
So on, so on the meeting calendar, so this is the sort of the second time that you all have seen this of the sort of proposed thoughts on where we would go with meetings for the rest of the year. I do want to apologize to Ashley. She provided additional topics, CTE and workforce, and I did not add it to the bottom of additional things. So I apologize for that. That was my error. But certainly CTE and workforce training programs and that type of thing is also something that we can certainly have a discussion on. So the end of the discussion tonight needs to be how are we going to move forward and with what on what dates. Like that's my end goal for this discussion. Just putting that out there because we are moving quickly into.
With the understanding all of this is flexible.
Yeah.
Can be
Yes.
moved around.
Yes, it can. It is certainly flexible. It is also something that I would urge us not to be super flexible on changing these, but certainly we can add to them if something comes up. For instance, if something comes up again like Washington Met, we can certainly add a second panel to these. Right? Each of these are the way that I'm considering this is a single panel, so an hour and a half of discussion. So we have additional time in our public meetings to have a second panel on something, always, right? So we can do that. So that's
Is that what the second row down here is, or
Those are suggestions of potential panelists.
panelists. Got it.
The last one. But those are just my thought suggestions. Those are not like we're going to invite you. So we're already sort of into February, and we've discussed too in the past that discussion of the budget would happen, not our budget, but the mayor's budget proposal, or at least for the school base, which came out this week, would be something to discuss. I have not had a whole lot of chance to review the ones for my or for anyone's boards or anything like that. I don't know if you guys have had a chance to review them, and if so, what is the sort of aspect that we want to talk about in the budget discussion and the public meeting?
Have they gotten them already?
Yes, they should have all gotten them this week. Yes.
Oh, they have.
Monday.
When did they get it?
Well, DCPS has.
Monday.
They got on Tuesday. I believe.
Someday this week. DCPS
It's
will-
only the Wednesday.
DCPS did receive, I think,
Yes, and they're online.
And the mayor announced that she's gonna increase the,
UPS works.
so I don't wanna spend too much time on February, I wanna sort of look at the whole thing, but I think the thing to say for February, if people are game, is that we should invite, some of the lead, the people that we know between now and then will have looked at this as much as it can be looked at and say, here are the issues,
Can
to
we-
help orient us. in a way.
I'm totally game for that. Per feedback that I've received, can we invite the mayor's office as well to just give justification for?
the mayor's budget office.
Yeah.
Sure, we can absolutely
I've
invite
heard
them.
that the executive has now been invited to have these councils to give their perspective.
Sure.
And they'll have turned their budgets in by now.
And maybe they won't go into great detail,
No,
but
no,
for
I'm
the
just
things
saying
they've
the budget-
announced, they could probably
They've
give
got what,
jurisdiction.
14 days turnaround? How is this
It's something like that, I don't know what specific. Or maybe even
I mean, is it-
DCPS.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Talk about that and stuff like that.
yeah, because I don't think the mayor's budget doesn't come out until March.
Correct, I know, but
Correct.
still, the rationale behind the 4% increase, the rationale behind,
I mean, we can
it's an
put it to
invitation. They don't have
an invitation to the DME, which you said to Harvard, that they think is appropriate.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
That'd be great.
So, comments on this, I mean, my feeling is, as we keep looking at this, and as we get closer, we wanna get firmer, this should be, look good, and people should feel like, over the course of the year, there's gonna be good things and things that we wanna hear about. No, she's
But is she?
no, she's not.
The only reason why I was asking, I recall her saying something about 2 social studies meetings.
Actually, she,
They're on.
March and
two are, I think she talked actually about 3, so we need to circle back on that. I think
Okay.
3 is probably
September.
too much for this year, but we should certainly need to circle back on that.
Okay, I will confirm with her.
What about well-rounded education?
Yes. We need that. You want to say,
I think that makes sense in June, if that's in the report too.
But I thought we wanted to do it nowish, like March, or
talk about what's,
the panel. So to inform the research that we'll be doing.
So maybe April?
Yeah. Could work.
can you say a couple of sentences about who you'd have on it or what would be?
Yeah, so I think, what we're trying to figure out is what supports are facilitating and what obstacles are hindering schools and practitioners' ability to actually offer a well-rounded
Do
curriculum.
you want to find that
students.
out before we do the survey?
Well, I think we want to hear from, I think all of this informs sort of our work around this, right? So,
Can I pose a slightly counter, which is to hear from, because we're gonna find out in a way that others don't have actually what is happening on the ground, and that maybe what we could have would be the kind of the reasoning for why we're even, it's almost like we're whetting the appetite for these reports, like you could get someone from DMTP to talk about the assignment study, you could get someone like Natalie Wexler or someone else to talk about why you need the knowledge, you could get someone to talk about sort of 2 or 3 of
why
these
it's important.
Like-
why it's important, why we're running this, why we've made this a priority.
maybe.
And then maybe ask, and also ask the LEAs or whatever to
Yeah,
come
I-
and to
I
talk
like
about
that
how
idea.
they're trying to do that.
Right.
And then we're gonna try to move forward from there.
Or, I mean, I guess what I was thinking was more, it's the same idea, but it's like, this is actually an issue that is important to practitioners, that they feel like, I mean, I understand that we wouldn't have trouble finding teachers and principals who are frustrated, right? And so it would be a way of, hearing. It depends when we do it. If we did it in March, I think it could inform the survey, actually, right?
Maybe we can have two. One is like around purpose and importance, and another is about feedback and like.
Here's how we are. It's partly why it's important because it is a point of frustration and also could inform sort of.
Like people's
The-
lived experiences in
yeah.
schools.
But I also like your idea, so what comes to mind, I guess, is DCPZ, the DC Project Zero folks, and of course, social studies. Scott. Yes.
I mean, he could talk about sort of what DCPS is trying to do.
Yeah.
So it sort of gives a platform for people to say, look, here's what we're trying to do.
Or Corey.
Corey.
Yeah. But yeah, so I'd have to think about it.
Okay. But that's
I would put it
suggestion.
on my
Okay, no,
front
so-
burner.
So we're thinking that for April.
So are we talking about adding that to that April meeting or replacing what is the Parks Administration with that?
So,
I would say replace it.
so what was the park administration conversation, or what was that?
So that was, that a number of us heard from a number of places, and this has been true not just this year, I know Zach heard it on his tour, but I think we've all heard it at different times, that there's issues around the administration. I mean, there's schools where there's no Wi-Fi.
Oh, right.
And just to sort of get this on the record, I mean, it may be that the way to do that is just to encourage people to come to the open testimony and just do it that
I
way.
think that's right.
How to be Algebra 1?
I just don't know if that's gonna be robust enough,
I also, yeah, I
or
also,
if it's gonna just spiral into what we normally would hear about park. Just whatever.
But I would say, I guess, to further jumble things up, my worry about July is that we'll lose all of the folks over the summer who could probably talk best about community schools.
So the reason that I put it in July is because the Community Schools Advisory Committee, of which I'm currently chair, meets in July. So that's one of the reasons that would be a
So it's
potential.
more than a DC group. I mean,
No. So this is the group that's been appointed by the mayor to encourage community schools throughout the district. And I also thought that it would then be completion of the first year of the DCPS connected schools, so we would have data to look at for an entire year, which would be nice. And it also isn't in the middle of the school year, so it might be easier for principals or teachers or students and families to also think about how it looks from this past year, and then also looking forward to the
It
next
might
year.
just be on
So
vacation.
they could also be in vacation. But this is one of the things. This is also one of the things that's helpful, though, to have this calendar in place. Is I can start inviting now, so people can plan around that meeting rather than.
or say to you,
Yes,
Don't
because
do
they're
July.
gonna throw it in Cancun.
Yeah. yeah.
Right.
They might put it off by a week.
Well, I was gonna say, what's the consequence of swapping June and July?
I don't think there is necessarily.
June was just the date when, well, I think this June topic is gonna change, but the reports are gonna come out in June. We could
So
still
I
do
need to say
this.
something about June. So so this is partly to hear from Aussie about what's going on with the school planning stuff, but it's also, I wrote down about growth, to sort of hear about, because this is in line with the research on quality measures, how you measure, what are good ways of measuring school quality, and one of them is sort of different ways of measuring school growth.
Did we already do that?
No, we did high school growth last spring, but now we're getting ready for, we're gonna have a
Would that not
report
be one
motion.
and the same?
Correct or not. I mean, it's a big question. How do you judge a school? I mean, how do you, what are the you wanna look at? Do you wanna look at attendance, or do you wanna look at,
Oh,
you know, what should you be looking at?
quality generally
Generally, and then,
versus growth on an assessment.
What,
yes,
should, I don't know, shouldn't our September meeting have something to do with like back to school?
Like what,
Maybe. I'm just talking about any, rather than student journalists.
So one of the reasons so this is one of the few, September is one of the few that is actually a double thing, right? So it's not a connected thing. Student newspapers and social studies standards. September was the date that Jessica had identified as being an appropriate check-in point for social studies standards.
No, I agree with
So
that.
the student newspapers piece came, and the reason that I put it here in September is helping us sort of focus on those types of issues, on the First Amendment issues, in student newspapers at the beginning of a year rather than during a year or something like that. But we can do it anytime. I think student newspapers we can certainly do anytime. Talk about that. It's also a little bit of a light month for us because we don't meet in August, so we have a little bit of extra time to think about who to identify and that sort of thing. So that can certainly go for move to any meeting.
But yes. I do think we could still do something. I know that's a long meeting, but maybe even if it's.
I do also want to note that the one thing that I did fail to put on here specifically is the annual reports of the student advocate and ombudsman. Those happen during working sessions and not during public meetings, and so that's why they're not on this list. This is largely public meeting focused.
Got it.
but I think we should have them in a public.
They very much prefer not to do that.
I think that, we got an election in November, I don't know if y'all know. I think that it would be, even with the student newspaper thing, if we could tie it into just having something to do with what's going on with the election. Not a political.
So that makes September a good time.
Not a political conversation, but just what's going on with, what's going on because it's a big election. And,
Oh, you're talking about the
Timing
national.
the social.
yeah.
That you're talking about.
No, I'm not talking about. I'm talking about getting students. Students, ready to vote.
That could be really powerful. That could be even for September, like
Yeah, that's right.
to put a spin on the social studies part of it, to invite students and have the civics led.
Actually, that's a really nice idea to do both of those in September as we're approaching the elections.
And
like that a lot.
also having people from the Census Bureau and from the whatever the organization is that points elections, DOE, I guess it's called.
Yeah.
Board of Elections.
DOE.
It started.
May I offer a recommendation that we go just month by month versus jumping around? Yeah.
Right, so March. So we're on for social studies for standards for March.
And to recap something that you said, I think in all these cases, insofar as we can have one topic, that's
Better.
good, because it allows us to have the flexibility to add one in if we need to.
Okay.
So April, we're shifting to well-rounded, or we're keeping part and doing well-rounded, or what are we
I
doing?
think it's well-rounded is the main thing, and then we think about inviting people to come tell us, if there were any problems or anything.
Okay.
But it will,
Just so that we can
So
get
the
that out of
panels
the
but I mean,
Well,
that is a point, should we wait until after part to have that? I mean, maybe that should go
Yes, we should, so maybe it
So
should go
should
in
May.
May, yeah, actually.
May or
you're right.
June,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
so
yeah, you're totally right.
So shift the asking.
Probably May, and
May their minister.
Oh, yeah, third week in May, maybe that
but
way,
the word we can May, it'll be,
yeah,
they'll be,
fully informed of all the topics.
well, we need to check that, but I think that's right.
So
what are we
would
doing
do?
with the teacher preparation?
So that's still gonna, well, that's the next month. Give me 1 second. All right, so we're working on well-rounded education in April. So then May, we would invite the public to come and talk about their experience with PART. And then for panels, teacher prep and teaching and reading.
Oh, okay.
Well, and specifically, what I would say for that, to go back to what we were talking about before, is that it should be about this issue of kind of certification and how other states do it or how we do it. I mean, what would it take to have in place a system by which
Can I
parents
propose?
and people would know? Yes.
Can I propose that we move that to July and move community schools to May?
Yes.
And the reason for it is if our reports come out in June, that might inform the discussions for the teacher certification panels. In other words, if we're finding like
Teacher prep program.
teacher prep, yeah. But if we're finding teachers need X skills that they are not having based on our study, then that could be lines of questions that we provide to the experts.
Right, so move community schools to May and teacher prep.
So then it'll be like
I think that's
our
what-
research reports in June, and then July will be the teacher.
Okay.
Prep.
Also, just as a side note, there's information on the survey that talks about teacher preparation too right now. Some questions that talk about, did they feel prepared?
Yes, there are questions on that. So, do we keep this quality measures in June as well? So we just have two.
What was the other one in June?
So June would. So I guess if we issue the report, we wouldn't. Would we want to? I would imagine we would want some discussion of the report. Right?
Wait, I'm sorry. In June.
So in June, based on our timelines, our research project should be complete.
Right.
I imagine we're presenting
Just-
them.
Just, right,
So-
it's June 12th, and our meeting
Yeah.
will be like
We can't
2
do
days
that.
after that, so,
Because we need to have it as a working session prior to being a public meeting.
so it would
Right.
be July.
So it'd be July.
Got it. Which still works then. If we're gonna do the teacher prep programs in July.
And then a panel on the well-rounded.
Yeah. And maybe we'll invite stakeholders to kind of share
Yeah.
what the reports say. And then teacher prep
We're done having both of them.
in July. Yeah. And so June would just stay the quality. School quality.
Okay. Then September, shifting, sorry.
No, the only thing I want to throw out is I think we should keep doing this. I want us to sit down with Malaya and talk about trustworthiness of different ones of these and what that might say about when we put, for example, we have 2 big reports coming out. Is July a good time to put them? So I just want her to be able to sort of take a look and sort of think through with us. Like, so we can develop a draft that know that we want to.
Yeah, once we get through them all, we'll allow and I will sit down and talk and make sure that they're.
I know June is already, if we could do 2 in June as well, keeping the school quality, I would just say maybe leaving a placeholder for our sister offices, since that continues to be a line of critique. Just maybe creating a panel based on what their recommendations are, whether that's special education, homelessness,
So they won't have recommendations in June.
or whatever they're, I guess asking them like, if you were to have a panel, what would be?
I was just saying I was saying we should have them do their reports, their quarterly reports, do one of them at a public meeting.
They prefer to do them in working sessions so that they can actually have discussion rather than.
So maybe a question to them is what would, I mean, because they have a set of services that we want to make sure are understood and known, so maybe it's not the report, but what could be
Yes.
Right.
a panel that,
And at our
or
oversight,
whatever.
and at our oversight hearing, that was something clearly cited that I would imagine there is. So it's just an
Yeah,
opportunity
no, I think we
to act
should,
on the
yeah,
feedback
to
that
act,
we
to
receive.
see what would be a useful,
Sure.
says what would be a,
So we can be saying we can.
where,
It might be a lot of the same. It might be special education again, or I don't think
well,
the issues
it
gonna
would,
change
it would be
drastically.
nice, actually, I mean, to
I'll
talk to maybe have
Would
a
have a
session
follow-up.
on special ed that's sort of mainly about, that starts with sort of their findings, but then maybe raises some issues or.
I'll bring it up with them at our next meeting, is to see what would be a good subject for us to tackle together.
Cool, cool.
Um,
And then Fraser suggested the student-led social studies. I imagine Jessica would want to do something broader, so that might be 2 panels, but one of which would be the students.
well,
Yeah.
also,
Well, so-
I don't wanna,
For social studies standards, the students panel is going to be in March.
yeah,
So
Right.
in the September social studies standards, we can certainly talk about civics and talk about census and do sort of an outreachy type of piece of it as well.
His suggestion was like, given the election, so you're saying do that in March?
I'm saying they're different things.
Okay.
Right. Social studies standards and the civics piece that Fraser was talking about are separate. So they're
Got it.
March
Yes.
social studies is going to be students, and then in September will be experts in those types of things.
Got it.
But I think at the same time, we can also use the September meeting to help make sure that there is public awareness of voter registration, of First Amendment rights, of all of these types of things that apply to youth just as well as they do.
well, and also,
When you make a call, when you make an announcement for the public to come in, that might be it, where we could get in touch with the Census Bureau or something like that to come in and testify, rather than have a panel. Rather than have a designated panel.
or it could be one
Just-
person we invite, we could be inviting panelists to say
it
one,
could
two,
just be
three,
a-
once.
A call for specific people to come in and talk about different things that have to do with the election and voters or whatever. Not about political.
So, so one other possibility, I mean, if I'm understanding, you're asking for sort of a set of panels that are providing factual information about political participation.
Right.
Okay, so that's A. And there's also one thing we could do that would be interesting, and Jessica's not here, so we can talk to her about it, but she might like it and it might fit really well, is if the September discussion about social studies standards was about the civics part of it.
No, we won't be ready for that by then.
I mean, for people to talk about what,
I know, but
I mean, I think why can't it just be an additional panel? So
well, we can.
it sounds like it'll be experts, but then just have an additional student panel about civics. Or
I
election.
wasn't really thinking about students testifying. I was thinking about people testifying about students and their rights.
To have make sure that there's sort of a public presentation about the registration, if
Right,
you're not registered, get registered, if you haven't
Got
decided.
it. I misunderstood. Sorry.
I mean, I think if the idea is to get the word out about things, we can do that without a panel. And
Right.
We can do that through our social media, which we already have been promoting the census and service registration and all those types of things as well. So we can do that too.
Okay. That's fine, just so it gets out.
I think both Alexes actually had comment.
I was just scratching
Oh.
On the census, piece, I have to confirm this, but I'm pretty sure that the window of time in which the census is going to be administered is over the summer, and it's going to end in July. And so, yes, I can see where this thought process was September, but I do think that the data collection will have already been completed by September.
Yeah, they already.
Because they're like already started. They started like earlier this year about you need to do the census, and I do think by mid-year, data will have stopped being collected, and it will now just be like they're going to start tabulating so that by a certain date it'll be ready.
Well, maybe we should just, if the point is to just bring awareness to the census issue, maybe we should just do a ceremonial in March, where there's a local DC campaign that's trying to get folks, right, to do.
Yeah, we've been, the Census has been working, well, I've been working with them specifically about using our social media to help promote, getting counted and what it means and how to get that information out. And I think I've sent it to members as well to put in your newsletter and that kind of thing, so we can certainly continue to do that. Yeah.
But we could just invite somebody to testify, right?
Sure.
Public testimony.
Yeah, I can contact them and they can, we can say, hey, can you come do public comment about this?
Yeah.
And we'll, it'll be videoed and we'll put it out everywhere.
Great.
And that could be February or March.
Yes.
February or March?
Yeah.
Ever better?
The sooner the better.
Well,
So
I'm quickly looking at a timeline, but it looks like in March is when households will begin to officially receive census stuff via the mail.
So that might be a good time.
So March might be better.
Okay.
We'll work with them on finding the right but great.
And there's no, just from your conversation, there's no specific way they ask schools to engage families around to have that we could promote or amplify.
I don't know. I know that the DC team has started to do some outreach with schools and things, but I don't know specifically. But that's a good thing that we can ask.
And I do know some of the mayor's like affinity offices. I don't know. I guess that's the word I'm using. I don't know if it's appropriate.
Yeah,
The community affair offices. I know many of them have done a lot of publication on the importance of the census.
Yeah.
Obviously, because thinking about marginalized communities underrepresented, like ensuring that they're actually counted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. So then moving back to September, so are we eliminating student newspapers and just having the social studies standards as our primary focus? I think that's fine, I just want to check.
Who said
You get one
Oh, okay,
Are you looking at me? I don't know anything about the student
Sounds
newspaper.
like we should have the student newspapers. I don't think we should.
Well, here was the thinking, I recommend this, is, in DC, there's a couple, you participate in this, is there's not a lot of schools that have newspapers, there's not a lot of high schools that have, like, there's two. I know Wilson is one, and there's one other.
Roosevelt has one.
Okay.
Dozo has one.
Doesn't, all right, so,
He did.
and there's now an effort underway by somebody to sort of create sort of resources to help, technical assistance to student newspapers. So the idea was to have some of the folks from the student newspapers come and talk about what they're doing and have an opportunity for the organization to talk about what's available in terms of services to students. So to help them have student journalism.
Could it be a broader civic engagement panel? But we have already a panel, so what were we gonna do?
Could we
Like-
do it during the working session instead?
It might actually be super interesting to actually have the student journalists here at a working session to just talk about what they're working on and how what their experience has been.
So our objective though is to
No, I mean, I think the point is to me, the point is to give them some airtime to explain what's available and to sort of promote the idea of student newspapers, which other cities have much more of than us. I don't see that as part of it.
But what are we going to do with that? Like, is it part of our promoting the social studies standards? That's sort of the notion of
Part of promoting the idea of student newspapers, there should be a line.
period. And then is it civics in
The
general?
work that we're doing, or how does it interplay?
It's an important part of student, it's part of student education and.
So
Then they could be public, public testimony.
Yeah, but it's not quite okay. Officially, like we do have one, but I mean, it's not to the extent that you like see. Like it's a monthly newsletter thing. Yeah, kind of, and it's just put in, like the front office, and like not really a lot of people pick it up, and you don't really hear about it either. I definitely think it would be really beneficial to see like more student newspapers. I just think it's an important thing.
Here's a idea. Could we add it to the school climate meeting and broaden it to not just be school newspapers, but extracurricular activities? And how they add to the school climate.
We don't have to do this if there's not interest. I just have the idea of student journalism.
A good way to maybe fit it would be maybe we can work with Malio to do like a student media day with the board where student publications could come in and interview either members or several members of the board about our official role
talk to them about what the issue is.
Right.
I mean, and then maybe that's sort of an opening to sort of hear, if it's, other people can have an opportunity to sort of talk to some of the students and see what, if there's a.
I think I missed it. That what happened at the public meeting?
Yeah.
No, no,
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Discussion.
We can happen a different day or happen a, I don't know, an hour before the public meeting or
What
whatever.
happened when we go
Yeah.
visit school?
There's lots of, I mean, you know,
She's full of ideas.
individual members could potentially shadow a student journalist through their day and experience it. And talk about that type of experience as well. I mean, there's
Write
lots of
some state board blog.
yes, they could.
Anyway, think about it.
Any student that
My
wants to.
reasoning on it was just that it's, I mean, I heard it raised a lot as an issue, and that DC doesn't have, we don't have a lot of social journalism. That's why it was sort of on my list, and people should think about it as a broader issue, and maybe it's not. Okay, I think we've got about half a year, and we're gonna have to come back to this.
So,
And I'll be
well, we
quiet.
only have 3 months left.
And I'll be quiet, but also just to spur other students' interest in it, maybe we also invite the college publications to come and talk to.
We haven't interviewed a number of times, or given students to
Yeah,
the college
I've been-
students, especially at Asheville.
Yeah.
And GW or Georgetown, several students have
So, recognizing that we do have time constraints, we have 3 more months. Can we talk about them quickly, or do you want to?
Is there a date that we have on the calendar ready to advise Cassie again about the report card? Like, is that something that's set?
Well, what?
No.
There will be things.
There will
That's
be.
part of why.
Yeah, no, I was wondering. So that's
Save mandatory reporting.
Since, yeah, they will be coming back a number of times on subjects between now and then, and it's part of that timeline that Matt presented on last month as well. So I can provide that again on what the timing is.
Yeah.
Sure. So October.
Governance.
So this is one of the things that we had talked about a little bit. I don't know if it's still.
I don't think we're ready to say. But we
Okay.
will have
I mean, we can
We
also
will be ready by October.
we can leave it blank too and just not necessarily have something if we don't want to.
I think we should hold ourselves accountable to talking about it. Opening up the conversation to the public to say, especially, I mean, we could talk about it this monthly meeting, given what just transpired, but just opening it up to the public to say, what role do you see the state board playing and how could that change? I would also just throw out there, since we want to start with working sessions, perhaps we can form a working session for those that are interested to start early in the year, perhaps April, to just start tossing ideas around, which would give several months runway for us to be on the same page of where we feel comfortable.
So just to make sure that I'm
Well, I think you mean a working group.
What did I say?
Working session.
I'm sorry,
Working
working
group on governance, and you
That-
sort of, something like that.
I think the admin committee would be the appropriate place for that, because I mean, it's the governance committee.
No, it's not our governance.
What is this
No.
about? It's about
What is the
the,
governance?
yeah, what is, can you
So it's
clarify?
about-
It's authority.
It's about the authority of the board, and so we've had conversations, whether it was Jack's amendment around the state board having authority similar to ANC's, whether it's conversations we've had around the state board having more authority over our procurement rights and processes, or even others who have had conversations around the state board's authority over legislation, for instance, and like what role might that happen? The graduation task force, where things go in, and they don't always come out.
That wouldn't be a public meeting.
Well, I think the public, but the working group would be an opportunity for everyone to be able to join in, which would be my argument against the admin committee, because that seems like a closed group.
Yeah.
But if, I would imagine many members would be interested in this conversation, and then that,
Yeah, start talking about it, sort of the way we did these other.
But why is it, this is our public meeting, right? It's-
the public meeting would be an opportunity for the public to come to talk about their opinions.
So the suggestion is to add another committee to discuss this in particular,
Yeah,
and then bring it to the public meeting in October.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
I like that idea.
Well, and in theory, we could also invite other representatives from state boards with different governance
Yeah.
structures.
ahead.
So we're just going to have long public comment on during that governance?
No,
No.
it would be a committee time meeting.
I'm talking
No,
about the
Oh, no, the
governance
panel.
public meeting.
Yeah, you
No,
said
I think
it says the
there would be a
21st.
question that we would be seeking, and that could be anywhere from state board. So thinking back to the retreat, and we looked at the roster of states and different formations and authorities of boards. Maybe the question is like, what are the variety of authority levels for state boards across the country? Or it could be a general conversation around, I wouldn't necessarily advocate for this, but mayoral control. I'm just throwing out hypotheticals where you then invite the public or experts to talk about where the state board fits into this broader education.
What Marcus was just saying is you could have people from some other states where it looks different and just talk about it, or talk about how,
So
Yeah, I think it's very.
start building a conversation around it.
So likely probably a mix of both public comment around, right, from residents around how governance could look differently, plus expert testimony around how governance is done differently around the country.
I would even
Gonna
see
say you're poking the bear. I really don't think it will be well received.
Sure.
And
So what?
Well received from
By the mayor?
well, not just the mayor's office, the council, the other people that we work with. And you say, so what? We have to work with these people. When
No, I
we
know
have
that, but you-
resolutions and we're demanding things, when we have meetings like this and we're saying, oh, give us more authority, I think it can come off as being.
But that's not what they were
If
talking
we want, no, right, I understand that, when we're looking at panels of other states having more or different authority, or
That was
better.
we need to see a world where we invite other DC agencies to come in that may have their own unique procurement policies to say, how does that function? Because we talked to multiple times.
That's really not part of it. Can I suggest on this, that we
Well-
make a marker, it's 7 months away or 9, I think we count, but a marker, and then a lot's gonna happen
Where
between
we
now
as
and
a
then.
board are comfortable in operating within those guidelines.
But if there are things that need to be fixed, we shouldn't ignore them.
So can I also,
Need to be fixed, it's.
I mean, so bringing us back to the calendar, right? Because that's, and I think this is an important point. It feels like there's more discussion that needs to happen there. So my suggestion would be that we set up a committee or working group or whatever we call it at the public meeting in February that then meets to discuss how to proceed on this.
Postpone it to March. Just for personal reasons.
Yeah,
Or we could do it in February,
No, I
I
mean,
just
but
won't
we're-
meet until.
I think we have an idea, we don't have to act on it, we're
No,
thinking this through and talking
That's
this
fine.
through. and-
So do you want to just have that discussion at the next working session then about whether or not to establish a group or not?
Oh,
Yeah, I mean, we could do that in
Okay.
February, March, yeah.
Okay, we can do that.
All right. We are, so I think we're most of the way through the meeting, and what I want to say, and I want to be clear, is this is a very important planning vehicle. Part of the reason is to make sure we try to accommodate a number of sessions, and I want to note we don't have CTE, we need to get it in there. One that, I can, we'll come back to this, the student discipline, restraint, and seclusion, which is a big issue, it's been written about a lot. Is another one, and so, we're not done, we're gonna come back, but I think we have a good start. We have a structure for thinking about it, we have ways to sort of drop things in, and that's sort of moving us in a direction of having a process for doing this. It's not gonna be, and it will always be a little bit subject to movement, so. Does that sound good to everybody? Yes, ma'am. So as people have additional topics, issues, send them to Jumbo. And what would be nice is if we could sort of take this up in maybe even in a regular way, but sort of just take a quick look at it at each meeting. People can continue to add things, we can can see how it's been moved, we can think if
We
we're
could
really
just-
ready for certain subjects and we'll.
We can just make sure, I mean, we could keep this as being part of your work session folder, every meeting, it'll be there.
Updated.
Wonderful. And, yeah.
Yes, okay.
If we go for yes.
Not the same, yeah.
No, not this, yes, updated.
Okay, all right, excellent, and a great start. Thank you very much, Jean Paul, for doing this, and thanks everybody for their contributions and the work you made together.
Great.
I'm gonna suggest we not have this feedback conversation tonight. Well, about how we're gonna do our work.
Well,
meetings and
membership
go back
would be
and
great.
forth and,
I'll take that.
And then, but I think we do wanna hear,
Sorry,
because we're late, we don't have a
need
lot
to
of
have
people.
one, sorry, the reporter, I need to have one conversation coming up. Thank you.
So I'm proposing to switch, to not do number 8 today, we'll come back to it at a later time. And, I don't think we have time or audience to do all the committee reports, but I do think we should hear from Well-Rounded, because they just did a big meeting today that was very, interesting and important. And Ashley, if you wanna go, you can go, if you wanna stay, I think this is all we'll do.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
fine.
I mean, does anybody else have other new business they're gonna raise?
I've got one question about, what, Duffy brought up yesterday about African American history. Being
Okay, hold that, it's a new business question, so I just want to give Ashley their.
Sorry.
And so I think we'll go straight to, if nobody objects, we'll go straight to the Well-Rounded Committee report, and we'll hear from that. So you can leave now, you can leave then, you can leave then.
Let's take a,
They want more.
stick it out.
Well-Rounded.
If you give me, 10 minutes.
Sure. So the work is progressing with standards research, and when we say standards research, that's the body of work that is investigating students' access to grade level instruction. Since our last meeting, we have confirmed our partnership with TNTP, who will execute the research for us. Today we had 2 stakeholder meetings, one with state agency stakeholders, so OSSI was present, the DME's office was present, and the charter board was present, as well as what we're dubbing representative stakeholders. So we had PAVE and Empower Ed, and I think that was it for today, but there are others from WTU and Focus were invited as well. And the point there is that we want this to be a shared project that many people are invested in, and that will be invested in taking the conversations and the work further once we complete in June. Alex is blasting out the proposal from TNTP. My apologies for not printing it. But in that proposal, you will see their suggested timelines, their approach, and the like. I think the headline for us is that there will be 3 parts to this. One is like a pre-school observation, which is where we are now. We're identifying buckets of schools. There was a preliminary discussion around should we do 1 school per ward. Obviously, we want this to be cross-sector. Where we're landing and feeling more comfortable is that we are not necessarily held to 1 school per ward, as long as we get a representative sampling of the city. And so that may mean perhaps maybe we wouldn't get a Ward 3 school. I'm talking hypothetically, not necessarily specifically Ward 3, but just throwing that out there. The second phase is actually the school visits, which will consist of class observations, student work analysis, and then teacher and principal interviews and focus groups. And then the third phase will be the production of the report. And that report should be completed by June.
And then, for the other part of this research, the well-rounded education access to well-rounded education, we're calling it now. We have decided to focus on, finding a vendor to help create and administer a survey. And then I don't know if you remember, but we had talked about doing focus groups and interviews. We would do that later, maybe next year. That's the second part of this research. So we have completed the SOW, and that is going to go out. And
It's going to the board
it's going out to
for
right.
everyone to take a look at.
Yes.
And one thing to note is it combines the work on the well-rounded education for the early elementary plus the whole teacher role that we talked about.
Right, so what we also decided for budgetary reasons, was that it made sense to create, so I should mention that the well-rounded, access to well-rounded education research focuses on K-2, but we also want to have the vendor create a K-12 survey that will also serve to ask questions about teacher retention for teachers who are still in the classroom, like what keeps them there, what is driving them to think about leaving, as well as other priority issues. So this is a very broad survey, and so what we're hoping is that the vendor will be able to, we're going to ask them to, focus on the K2 for the well-rounded education, but also ask the other questions. So we'll be collecting multiple pieces of data.
And that too is expected to wrap in June.
Right.
So we should have 2 major research projects coming down the pipeline around
It's
that.
very exciting. And prior to that,
Is teacher attrition, Alex?
I don't know.
Alex, you got the,
Um,
just a pretty face.
So the vendor has wrapped up the focus group discussions that happened, or focus group discussions as well as structured video interviews. The pool of teachers that was used were individuals who responded to the survey and indicated that they would be interested in having a follow-up discussion. There were 3 focus groups that happened, I believe now it's been 2 weeks ago. Each focus group had about 8 to 9 recently exited teachers in it. And then the following week, which I guess was the last week, there were, I want to say 10 individual structured video interviews that were done. And so that's a total of around 30 individuals that took the survey, and then there was additional conversation on. The survey, I think, was the final number of surveys, I think, was around 250 people responded to the survey. That was over a 3-week period of time. Most individuals responded via kind of a text message communication and were able to complete it on their phone within about 13 to 15 minutes. I think there's a lot of really interesting insights that the vendor and I have talked about, some of which you all have discussed, and then others that, kind of pick up on kind of other hunches, but it's going well. We are anticipating a draft report being delivered to myself and kind of other staff members, I think next Friday. And the report should be turned around by the end of this month to them, and then in front of you in advance of the March working session. So that's where the teacher attrition work is going, but I think it's going along really well. So yeah.
I remember we were talking a little while ago about something to increase the pool of charter LEAs we had to participate. Where was that? How are we on that?
So the charter LEA pool did increase slightly, I think, after our ask, but I think the pool was not, it wasn't huge. I want to say there may have been 6 or 7 charter LEAs that chose to participate. One of the LEAs that did participate is a larger LEA in the District of Columbia that has multiple campuses, so I think that's good. And then other
the
individual LEAs.
proportion was relatively high to what I was guessing. Proportion. We'll hear all.
But yeah, you'll hear more. So
That's exciting.
yeah, but it's going. I think it's going well, very, very well, and the vendor has indicated that it's. He's very happy with how it's going as well. So it's very smooth, not a lot of hiccups, and so yeah.
Just throwing this out there, I don't know what Jessica has planned, but if there could be a second panel connected to this,
I think it's important for us to get the report before we move that.
Well,
to talk about a topic, teacher retention as a
Right, but I think we need to have a discussion on